Okay, so band's gone home. We've been working on the track all day long. I've got my rough balance from my overdubs up on the board, and we're going to try to do a quick mix on it. I'm going to show you the process. I usually start with faders up. The first thing I usually do is get a mix of the track, my kind of sketch of the song, and get a basic balance, and then I'll start to work from there. I don't really solo just the drums and work on the drums, or solo the bass or kick drum and work on that. I like to start with the whole and fill in the missing pieces. For the purpose of the mix, we'll break things down. I'll show you the drums, we'll show you the parallel compression that gets added, the inserts that get added. So we'll sort of build it in blocks, but not each channel at a time. So I'm going to run you through the console, show you how things are laid out, how things are patched in. Basically, I've got 30 tracks coming from Pro Tools, 28 instruments, 2 tracks of vocal effects, meaning some delays and reverb that we've been listening to in Pro Tools, some Echo Boy plugin, some long reverb on the background vocals. It's kind of a special sound. So those are coming up on faders. And then from here on down, we have all the parallels plus all the reverbs. We've got a live chamber here, which sounds great. We put a pre-delay on it. We've got an old EMT plate. We put a pre-delay on that. Then we've got a couple of digital reverbs that we'll use for drums, a PCM 70 and an AMS RMX. And those will give me the sort of close room sound and crunch of the digital reverb that we'll probably add to drums. This section of the console here is all my parallel compressors. I usually do a combination of a number of things on drums. I'll get one parallel compressor for thickness and toughness, one for tone and length, and then a couple of others maybe for point. Since we've lived with this mix for a while and got it in a good state, I might not go too far with parallels, but I want to show you how they work. I've also got a parallel DBX for bass, and I've got another parallel 1176 for lead vocal. And we'll try a couple of different things perhaps with the lead vocal. Okay, so I'm going to play you a little bit of the track with the basic balance that we've had going this afternoon while we've been building all these overdubs. Okay, so there's our basic balance of the track. So now we're going to add some parallels. There's a couple of little adjustments we made while we were listening. For instance, I felt like the kick drum was a little shy on the low end, so I added a little 50 there. I wanted a little bit more definition on the hi-hat, so I added a little bit of tip-top on the hi-hat. This pulse synth that goes through the whole song, I wanted to get that to poke out a little bit more, so we added a taste of mid-range EQ to that. But let's start to show you the parallel compression that we'll use on the drums. And as I mentioned before, there's a few different sets of it, and it's different for every tune, but I'm going to start with a kind of standard setup that I use. And by the way, all this applies if I'm working on a great old analog console like this, or if I'm working in the box. I do the same kind of parallels. Perhaps in the box I might do a little less, actually, because I can get a little bit more specific and maybe a little bit more aggressive with them in the box. But here, especially with a console like this, which is big, fat analog console, and sounds tend to be a little wider, a little bigger, so I don't need to work as hard in ways. So the first compressor I have on the drums is going to be a Neve 33609, and that's going to supply some of the punch to the drum kit. After that, I'm going to bring in a TG1 Chandler compressor that will give me a little bit more tone, a little bit more excitement. And if I need it, I might do a separate parallel for the kick drum and one for the snare, just to add a little bit of punch to the kick, maybe a little bit of length to the snare. And again, these parallels, I only send my close mics to them. I don't send the rooms to them. I don't send the mono room or any of the far ambient tracks. I just want to get more punch out of the drums, so I'm sending my close mics only. So let's hear just the drums with no parallel compression. So the first thing we're going to show you is the Neve parallel compressor. That's the one that's going to add some punch to the kit. Drums without, and then we'll slowly bring it in. Okay, so here's the drums without the compressor. And I'm going to slowly bring it in. And there's a bit of the parallel, kind of adding some punch and forward quality to the kick and snare. Usually I leave these pretty fast release. The Neve, you can't change the attack time. And I tend to go with lower ratios, like 3-to-1, 4-to-1, to keep the attack there. Okay, if I feel like I need a little bit more tone, a little bit more sustain, I'll go to something really aggressive like the Chandler TG. So you can hear how that really brings out the tone of the snare. And I might even push the compressor a little bit more. No compressor. TG in. Okay, so let's see what happens if we add a little bit of both of them. That's sounding pretty good. You can see now the sound of the parallel compressors. They're really toughening the drums up, but they're not dramatically changing the sound. It's maybe only 20-30% of the overall sound. Okay, from here, if I feel like I want to get a little bit more point, a little bit more definition, aggression on the kick drum, I'll send just the kick track, which is my summed track of 3 microphones, to a distressor. So I have my kick drum going to just the distressor, and I'm going to use the distressor to get a little bit more attack, point, punch out of the kick. With the parallels, sometimes they get EQ'd, sometimes not. In this case, I want to get a little bit more attack from the parallel on the kick drum, so I'm going to just punch it up a little bit here. I'm going to add a bit of EQ to the parallel distressor. That happens after the compression on the console return, not sending more top into the compressor. So I'm basically just brightening up the return of the compressor, just getting a little bit more punch on the kick drum. And then I'm just going to tuck that into my overall mix. And in general with the parallels, I try to get away with using as little as I can. I try to keep the main original sound intact. So I've got a spot here that feels kind of good balance-wise with the original sound, but maybe once I hear the bass I might need to push it up a little more to get a little bit more attack on the kick. And I'm going to do the same with the snare, but I'm going to use the compressor on the snare to get a little bit more length, a little bit more tone from it. Not necessarily. So I've set the distressor to be a little faster on the attack, a little longer on the release. Okay, so here's my snare without the parallel. And then I'm going to slowly bring it in. So without it, with it. And I'm going to add just a little bit of bottom to it just to fill the tone out. Okay, so now we'll bring in bass and guitar and some other elements. Okay, the bass guitar gets parallel as well. Going into a DBX 160 that gets compressed maybe 5 dB, and that's being added back into the mix here. And I'm going to try to get a little bit more bottom out of it. I'm just going to add some mids too because I like that grunt that bass has. Okay, once again I'm going to play the mix with no parallels. Okay, and then they're all coming back. And maybe let's just add a bit of reverb to the snare. I like to use the PCM 70 as a brighter, crackier reverb. and then an AMS RMX for a little bit of fatness. Okay, so now it's starting to feel like it's got some energy. All right, let's bring in some other elements. So now we'll add in some guitar, some other keyboards. I'll bring in the guitar double. So with a track like this, I won't need a parallel compressor for the guitar. Very often, if I have a wall of guitars, especially big distorted guitars, I'll have a separate parallel just for guitars. Probably something like a Daking compressor, or maybe another Neve, or sometimes 1176s that I'll just tuck in to get the guitars to rise above the drums. With a clean guitar like this, I don't really need that much. So I might brighten the guitar up just a crack, but it feels pretty good the way it is. All right, so I have a basic balance now for my guitar, drums, bass, a couple of keyboards in the mix. I'm going to start to bring in everything else because they're very small elements. They don't take up a lot of room in the mix. They just need to poke out wherever appropriate. So I think I can really put all that in the mix and feel good about it. The mellotron, which does run through the whole song, might need to be carved out a little bit, might need to be brightened or thinned out a little bit. Okay, so we have our basic elements of the mix. I'm going to bring in some of the smaller elements, bring in the mellotron, balance a few things out. So I've listened to the mix with all my main elements in it, and I wanted to get the mellotron to cut through a little bit more. So I thinned it out a little bit, added a crack of mids. I went back and forth with the reverb on it. I wanted to get it wider and bigger, but it just seems to wash out the mix. So I'm leaving it relatively dry. There's just a touch of chamber on it. Mainly the chamber because it's a little brighter than the plate, and it'll just give me a little bit of depth but won't eat up too much room. And as I go along, I may find that it's still too much and I'll just get rid of it altogether.